I've been interested in getting a rotating screen bracket for some time now. The high cost and the lack of an OEM look were two of the reasons I have put it off. Well, today I got one and we'll be unboxing and installing it. This particular version I purchased from AliExpress for what I think is a really good deal of $89. I will also include links in the description for the AliExpress and for Amazon. First, let's see what we get. The box has a magnetic flip lid, and inside there is a protective foam insert that can also be used during the installation. Underneath that is an instruction sheet with color steps for the disassembly on one side and the installation on the other. This is a bag of tools and screws that I will go over in detail later. By the way, this kit can be used for both the Model 3 and Model Y. The parts in the kit are nicely protected in this soft foam with cutouts. First, I'll take out the main piece, which is the aluminum bracket, which is nicely made, and it comes in two sections connected with a bolt and what appears to be a silicone washer in between. There are two openings on one end to connect to the car, and another two openings to connect to the screen. The other parts are made from ABS plastic with a similar coloring and finish as the silver plastic on the dashboard area of the car. This is the dash shroud and gets installed over the bracket and attaches to the dashboard. Next is the screen shroud that gets attached to the screen and shields the cable. Inside this packing bag is a small trim section that will cover the opening on the screen shroud after it gets installed on the back of the screen. This is a temperature sensor cover plate that replaces the original one in the car for this kit. This one happens to be for a 2017 through 2020 Model 3 and 2020 Model Y. And the one on the right is the 2021 and newer Model 3 and Model Y. There are three screws included in the tool bag that are used to attach the temperature sensor to either of these cover plates. In this bag is the final piece, an optional bar to fill the gap between the dash shroud and the dash panel. It fits over two screw holes on the dash. If your car doesn't have the gap, you can skip the installation of this piece. These are two T25 Torx bolts for attaching the screen shroud to the back of the screen. Let me go into more detail on the tool bag. We have a plastic pry bar used in two parts of the installation. A Torx T25 wrench for the screen shroud, a 10mm socket wrench for the bolts holding the screen to the car, a PZ1 Phillips screwdriver, and finally an H5 hex Allen wrench. Now I will let you know how I modified this for my installation. The pry bar works well for the first part of the install, but not the second. And I'll show this in detail during the installation. I found that I had to use a narrow flat blade screwdriver. Next, the T25 wrench didn't work for removing the screws on the temperature sensor. As you can see, it's too big to fit. The screw is actually a T20. I happen to have a T20 bit and will use it with my screwdriver along with the T25 bit. Here you can see the bit fitting into the screw easily. So I left the kit T25 wrench out of the install. Next, the 10mm wrench is really too small to use with regard to leverage. The 10mm bolt on the screen can be really torqued on tightly, so I use a 10mm socket on my ratchet wrench and use that instead. So the kit 10mm wrench is also left out of the install. I did use the included H5 hex or Allen wrench since the area where the bolt is to be attached is very shallow. You could use the PZ1 Phillips head screwdriver from the kit, there's nothing wrong with it. I instead used the PZ1 bit on my screwdriver since I was also using it with the other bits. So that's it as far as tools go. Before I forget, it's good to use a towel or old t-shirt to have on the center console and dashboard so that nothing scratches the surface or damages the LCD screen. This foam insert from the box is included as a soft area to put under the screen while working. It really wasn't necessary since I had a bunch of other things to protect the surface, but I include it anyway. This is part 1, the screen disassembly. I get the tools out and all the parts ready for easy access. I also placed a towel on the center console below the screen. The first thing I have to do is remove the existing temperature sensor, and it is located on this panel under the screen. You will see a small rectangular indentation in the plastic. This is where I insert the plastic pry bar and use it to pop off the cover as shown. I use the screwdriver with the T20 Torx bit to remove the 2 screws on this panel. The trim piece and screws are not needed in the rest of the install, but I saved them just in case I ever need to put it back together in the original setup. Next up, I need to remove the 2 10mm bolts that hold the screen to the bracket on the car. I'll use the 10mm socket on my ratchet wrench to remove both of them now. Make sure to save these 2 bolts, you will need them later. And remove the second bolt. On the screen, go to the main menu and then into the security menu. Press shutdown. This will turn off the screen. Be careful not to press the screen touch surface or it will turn back on. This step probably isn't necessary, but I want to be extra cautious. Holding the sides of the screen, gently pull it out from the car. Once it is free from the 2 brackets, gently place the screen down or sideways onto the center console. I placed it on the side for ease of videoing this sequence. Be careful of the power and signal cable. It's just long enough to work on, but you don't want to stretch it. With the screen on the side, you will see 2 T25 bolts on either side of the rear area inside the plastic shroud. Use the T25-bit screwdriver to remove both of them now. Save these bolts, you will need them later in the installation process. Now I can remove the shroud from the back of the screen, just far enough to get access to the area underneath. There is a black plastic surround piece that goes around it to support the cable and the connector. Loosen it and it will pop off, and then you can remove it. Save this for later. The connector now needs to be removed, but there is a plastic locking tab that needs to be pushed in first. I had no luck using the plastic pry bar for this particular step, so I ended up using the thin, flat head screwdriver to press inside the opening to move the tab over and release the lock. Pull on the connector, but not the cable itself. It will come out now with a bit of force. Remove the plastic shroud. Pull the cable out through this piece. You don't need to keep this item. Place the screen front side down onto the towel to rest. If you haven't already done so, put a t-shirt or towel on the top of the dashboard. Use the foam insert if you have it too. Pick up the screen and then place it on the t-shirt or towel so it is up and out of the way for the next steps in the process. Part 2. Install bracket and screen. Take the black aluminum rotating bracket and insert it into the 2 car mount openings. Use the 2 10mm bolts that we removed earlier. As is, the bolts will not fit into the bracket. I need to remove the bracket and turn the pivot all the way to the left. Now I will have access to the hole underneath. Insert one bolt into the opening underneath the bracket and into the mount. Hand tighten to make sure that they are going in correctly. Now use the ratchet wrench to tighten, not fully yet, just most of the way. Now move the pivot to the right so that we have access to the left side. Take the other 10mm bolt and do the same thing on the other side. And use the ratchet to tighten the bolt as far as it will go. You will feel the resistance and then stop. Bend the pivot back the other way and continue tightening the right side so that it is also fully torqued. The mount and bracket should now be very solid. Move the bracket pivot so that the mount is now straight across. Get the dash shroud out and thread the cable through the opening as shown here. Place the shroud over the bracket. You will need to turn it and shimmy it over from the left and right sides of the bracket, and you also may need to twist the pivot if necessary. Insert the optional fastener gasket if needed. If you have a big gap between where the shroud meets the dashboard, you will need to put it on. In my case, I did. You will see the two screw mounts where the plastic piece will fit over. The hole near the edge of the plastic will fit on the left side. Place the dash shroud so that the bottom clips are inserted first into the dash. Then, holding down the gasket, press the shroud's top 3 clips into place. They will snap into the dashboard. Here's how it looks with the shroud installed. There should be a nice fit with a narrow gap around the outer edge. Take the screen down from the dashboard and carefully place it on the center console with the towels or t-shirt for protection. The top of the screen will be facing the back of the car. Take the screen shroud and place it so that the opening is facing the rear of the car, and thread the screen cable through the shroud. Insert the screen, power, and signal cable connector into the opening. It will snap in and the lock will pop out. Get the black plastic connector surround and place it around the cable and then push it down over the connector. It will also snap into place. You can now put the screen shroud on and line up the holes to where the bolts will be installed. These are the T25 bolts that were on the screen originally. Insert one into the opening and then use the T25 screwdriver and tighten the bolt in. Then you could do this on the other side. Carefully pick up the screen on both sides and place it on the bracket. It will have more of an angle than the original, as you can see here. Get the new H5 hex bolts from the box. I'm going to move the camera to get a better view underneath. I will insert the new H5 hex bolt into the shroud opening and into the bracket. Hand tighten to make sure the bolts are threaded correctly. Now take the H5 hex or Allen wrench and tighten it up. Do the same thing for the other side. The temperature sensor cable should still be dangling outside the mount. Take the appropriate sensor plate and place it with the sensor. The bottom of the plate has a tab clip. Place the sensor so that the wire leads to the right of the plate. Now take the screws and attach them to the openings on the plate. Use the screwdriver to tighten them down. Insert the sensor cover plate into the opening that is just below the mount. Snap in the bottom clip first, and then the two top clips. They will pop in as you can see here. Take the shroud trim cover and remove the 3 backing plastic strips off the tape. Place the cover so that it follows the outline of the rear of the shroud. Press down firmly to adhere the double-sided tape. I placed a piece of gaffer tape to allow the adhesive to cure and will remove it in a couple days. And now the project is complete. I want to show you the difference in placement of the screen. Here is a before, and this is the after. The screen is about 1.5 inches lower than before, and closer to the driver. I think it's easier to reach the far parts of the screen now. The screen is also slightly to the right, about 1/2 inch, so that when the screen pivots towards the driver, it isn't blocked by the steering wheel. From the driver's seat, here is a view from eye level of the screen with the pivot set to straight. Now I move the screen all the way to the left, which is about a 30-degree angle. Here are some more views of it as I move around the cabin. The movement of the pivot is very smooth. It takes just enough pressure to move it without feeling too tight or too loose. It will not move unless you purposely choose to do so. The mount is also very solid. There's no wobble to the screen at all. Let me get out and move to the front passenger seat. From here I can see the screen set to the straight position from my eye level. Now I will move it to the far right, which is also about 30 degrees. Here's an example of the pivot motion from right to center and then to left. It has a detent for the centered position. Moving the screen all the way to the right, it gets very close to the dash, but it doesn't touch it. Overall, I think the installation went very smoothly. It's not that difficult. I really like this mount, and I think it's a good deal for under $200. and a great deal for under $100. It moves the screen lower and makes it easier to reach. The pivot allows for better glare control, and a driver or passenger focused viewing when needed. This is what the screen looks like from outside of the car. I think it looks really good and OEM. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions or comments, please ask them down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.